Hello, my name is Craig Otto. I'm a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt. Today we're going to talk about project management, and we'll have a couple different topics. One is talking about charters, and the other is talking about Plan, Do, Check, Act, or PDCA. So when you're leading different efforts, whether it be projects or teams, it's always important to have a team charter. I've also done other videos on team charters, but this one specifically, I wanted to talk about if you're leading a project or you're responsible for a project. I kind of want to go through the process, at least at a high level. First thing you need when leading a project is your project charter. And your charter should have these 5 main things. One is your mission. This should tie back to what is it that you're really trying to accomplish as a team. In this example, I say to create flow with the invoicing process to ensure the reduced lead time for customers. So it's something very specific. Obviously, we're looking at an invoicing process, but this could be anything with your process as well. The scope is the next important thing. Of course, you want to make sure that you're very particular about your scope, especially on a project. On this particular example, I just said customer order received to the point that the customer bill payment is received. And that really narrows down the scope of the process of what you're looking at. So in other words, nothing should be looked at before the customer orders, and once the bill is received, the payment is received, nothing after. There's opportunities to have issues before and after that part of the process. But for this particular team, we want to make sure that we stay focused. The next item there is the deliverables of the event. So deliverables are basically could be tasks or outcomes. In this case, we have standard work as a deliverable. We have a value stream map, and we have a 12-month action plan. So you can see very specific things that we need to have come out of this project. Whereas the goals are a little bit different. That's on your top right. So the goals are the metrics that you're trying to achieve by implementing this project. So for us, the lead time, we want that to be less than 15 days. We want the quality to be less than 1 error for every 1,000 invoices. And we want to have less than 5 handoffs. Obviously, every handoff is waste. So that's why we're trying to drive that down. And then you also want to make sure you have identified the team roles and responsibilities. You see Frank is the supervisor there, so he will be the process owner. The accountant, right, John, he might be someone who's in the process. And then you have 2 operational excellence professionals there. One's a practitioner, one's a journeyman. And so this way, everything is kind of laid out for the team. And you'll review this before you jump into any team project. You always want to put the project out there, the charter out there in front of the team so they understand their mission and their purpose and their scope. The next topic I'd like to talk about is PDCA, or Plan, Do, Check, Act. I'd like to talk about the project management cycle now. You'll find that many continuous improvement efforts follow this basic path of improvement, whether you're talking about Lean or Six Sigma or really any type of improvement. You'll find this common thread throughout this Plan, Do, Check, Act. So with that, let's go ahead and take a look here. So on the left side, I have the Plan, Do, Check, Act, and I have it color-based. That's for a reason. We're going to see why here in just a moment. And then on the right side, what I'm going to do is kind of lay out the different steps of the improvement process. So typically, you always start with the initial state or the current state. And then next you have a future state, which you either identify through a project or an event or what have you. But some way you lay out, where you want to be. And then you also have an ideal state. Many times in continuous improvement, you're not able to go to the ideal state right away. There has to be many steps of a future state, multiple progressions of a future state to get to that ideal state path. That's sort of that perfect situation. And some other things I want you to consider is as you get more towards perfect, when you consider the lean tools, those tools will be implemented more and more. So in other words, if you look at the worst state condition, which may or may not be your initial state. Typically, those types of situations don't have a lot of lean tools applied, or not a lot of continuous improvement tools. And as you implement more and more of the tools, you'll find that that really drives you more towards that ideal state, because the tools are what actually eliminate waste. It's what actually gives results. And the little atom symbol at the top, you'll see me use that often. That is true north. That is our customer needs and the perfect amount of value for the customer of what they're looking for. Next, I want to talk about the principles. And again, as you use the tools, they are what help you implement the principles along with the systems. You can see the little compass there. That's what I use to signify the principles. So as you implement the tools, implement the systems, and go up that path towards the ideal state, towards what the customer needs really are, what really provides value, you'll actually see that you implement more and more principles within your culture. All right, so next I want to lay in there sort of the current state marker, the little dashed lines there, the white dashed lines with the two different pings there. So that signifies where we're at. You can see it's right below the future state, and it's right meant to identify where we are with current state. All right, so now we're going to walk through the plan, do, check, act cycle, and I want to show how it works. So the plan is kind of identifying what good looks like. And in our situation, you can see the little bullseye right next to the future state line. It's kind of in between the future state and ideal state, the little yellow bullseye. That is the future state of where we're trying to get to with our current process. And everything in between there is what is called a gap. And that gap is the gap between where we are to where we want to get to. And everything in between, we call that a gap analysis. So we look at how do we get to where we want to go. And typically what helps you eliminate that gap is implementing the lean tools, and it's utilizing the principles. And so that's why that's also off to the left there. That gap is not just the gap between your current and future, but it's the gap from your tools being used and not being used, as well as your principles not being used versus being incorporated and used. So that is your gap analysis. That is what we're trying to jump over and get to. And so we'll take that away for just a moment. So the next step, we have our plan in place. The next step is do. And when you do, you can see that's the taking action. It's implementing the tools. It's utilizing the systems, right? And that drives that current state up. And you can see the initial state stays down there where we started. The current state is now new. This is a new current state. And you can see we're still not quite to where we wanted to get to in that future state. So we just took a step, right? But we did make a step. So that's why it's plan, do, and then our next step is to check. And when you check, what that means is you're looking at, okay, we've implemented some lean tools, we've implemented some improvements. What further gaps do we have? What else do we need to implement, right? And so that's what you're really checking. You're also making sure that you didn't go backwards, right? Always making sure you're making improvements going forwards. Once you've done your check, now you can act again and drive further improvement, which hopefully gets you to that future state. It may not always get you there. It may get you farther than you anticipated, but your goal is to get that gap closed from what was the initial state all the way to the future. Okay? One thing I want to talk about before we leave this project management cycle is kind of the cultural enablers, the principles behind some of this. I always think that's important. One of the things I want to talk about today is pride. Pride can be something that is important. A lot of times if your business does something that's unique or has a major impact, maybe you save lives, there's something to be said for having pride in what you do, right? And having that confidence to achieve the level of excellence of what you need to achieve. But pride should not make up your entire um, cultural being, and it should only be a piece to the bigger puzzle. And what I mean by that is, so when you do your job, you should have a certain amount of wisdom. And wisdom is different than pride. Wisdom doesn't mean that you know everything you know because of you. Wisdom means that you know everything you know because of your experiences, because of the principles, and you're willing to give the credit where credit is due. I know for me personally, I've been very successful, but it's not me. It's the people that I've surrounded myself with. Every success that I've had was because of a team of people, not because of what I do. And I always see my role as an enabler to that team success. I see my role as communicating people's potential and worth so that they come to see it in themselves, so that they're able to be successful, right? And so I typically make sure I give credit to the people who are actually making the improvement, because it's not really me, right? And that's the wisdom that comes from it. Do I have a lot of pride in things that I've done with events and things? Sure, but I would never put that above the people who actually were in the events, making the improvements, implementing the tools. I give them all the credit, right? And that's really what wisdom is about, is having appreciation of learning from your experience and learning from the principles. And that's very different than pride. And then the next aspect of that is humility. So pride and looking backwards with wisdom is kind of looking back at past experience, and humility is looking forward. So that's looking into the future to say, yeah, I still have a lot to learn. There's still a lot of things that I think I could do better with. I still have a lot of tools that I need to learn to implement. I still have a lot of principles that I need to grow and learn and understand from. And that's really what humility is about. And that is a key piece to an improvement. If you do not have that humility, it's over. There is no more improvement. And what I mean by that, if you look at the slide now, so when pride takes up a majority of your the way that you see things, now everything is almost like, well, I'm already at my ideal state. I can't get any better than this, right? And any wisdom that you have is very little, right? It's all about what you have accomplished and about no one else. And that is very dangerous when it comes to continuous improvement, because that actually kills continuous improvement. If you're already the best that you can be, then there's no opportunity to get better. And it just drives that arrogance, and people really don't want to work with you when you're like that. That arrogance, people want openness, and they want humility, and they want to work together to achieve a common goal. Whereas pride is very alienated, it's isolated when it's used in the wrong way. So that's really what you need to watch out for. I'll say that with pride, you have a lot of resistance to feedback. You overestimate your abilities. You fear vulnerability, and you're averse to change. And that is so hindering to operational excellence and making things better. But as I mentioned, I don't want us to make pride sound like the complete bad guy, because there is a healthy form of it, like taking ownership of your work, being proud of your progress, right, and striving to be your best. That can lead to fuel for your improvement, but it needs to be more of a humble confidence, to where you're believing in your potential, but also staying open to growth. Here we can see just a real high-level summary of balancing pride and humility. The top table with the personal traits, that is for you as an individual contributor, right? It's important to have confidence, but it should have that drive for steady growth and resilience. Pride should be, used as fuel for motivating improvement. Feedback should be used as insight, right? And mistakes should be seen as important for learning, right? That's how you need to be using this table. And then the one below it is more if you're a people leader and you're in a position of leadership. And so if you're looking at decision making, right, you want to focus more on being collaborative and inclusive to get the best outcome. When you're talking about feedback culture, you want to be open, you want people to feel safe, and you want people to have that ongoing communication. From a team engagement perspective, you want to be trust-based, right? You want to come across as authentic. So people really look for you to be open to that improvement. And of course, with authority, always be respectful, and it should be earned daily, right? So these are just some high-level things that you can use to help balance that pride versus humility in your problem-solving process and when you're working projects. That's going to conclude everything we want to talk about today. There will be several other videos that I will be doing to kind of tackle more deeply the Plan, Do, Check, Act and how is it applied in different situations. I just think it's important, though, with this being kind of the first video introducing project management, it's important to know that everything has that foundational Plan, Do, Check, Act built within it. And once you see that, it really helps all the other methods, because there's many out there. It helps you really see that all these methods are just tiny little tweaks to accomplish the same thing. You're trying to solve a problem. You're trying to improve a process. You're trying to incorporate a change. All of it rolls back to Plan, Do, Check, Act. And once you understand that, it really, everything else just kind of falls into place. And it's just variations of, the tools to help you address your specific need or issue. Thank you very much for joining me today. And don't forget to subscribe and like my video. Thank you.